Today we're talking pond fishing from beginner to expert, right? Like there's so many different ways to catch a bass, and pond fishing is more grassroots, where we all began, where we all fell in love with the sport, well, most of us. And we're going to have an awesome guest lined up for you today here on the Lure Lab. As always, I am your host, the Captain Andrew Full, and the Lure Lab is presented by Omnia, and it is a part of the Serious Angler Network. So, anything that we discussed today in this episode, all the products are going to be linked down below in the description that are available on Omnia, and you can head over there by clicking on those links, typing in code SERIOUS10 to save yourself 10% off of your order. So we appreciate you tuning in here to the Lure Lab this week, and we have our awesome guest that will be joining us here in a minute, which will be Debo from Debo's Fishing. And if you've been living underneath a rock and you don't follow him on social media, I would be surprised. He's got pretty cool following from beginner to intermediate, and I'm sure even some advanced people follow him as well. He loves pond fishing, so I wanted to invite Debo on here to chat about pond fishing and catching some bass, and there's some awesome stories that are coming in this episode as well. So I hope you enjoy. All right, we are joined by Debo of Debo's Fishing. If you have not seen his YouTube or his Instagram or any of his social media, you may be sleeping under a rock. We thoroughly enjoy his content, and today we're talking all things pond fishing. So, out in the Midwest, right, Debo, where
Heck
you're
yeah.
at, and
Yep. Good old
ponds.
Iowa.
There's a few
Go
ponds
Hawks.
around out there in the farmland and Caitlin Clark land and Cooper DeJean land, right? Like,
Yes.
love
Yes.
it.
Go Coop.
Go Coop, man. What a Super Bowl. But how are things, man? It's been a minute since we've had a chance to chat. So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the invite on. I'm pleased to be on. I've, just kind of been doing the same thing. Last year I got a kayak, so that definitely mixed things up for me a lot. I was able to get out to, some places I was never able to hit before. I had a John boat and stuff, but the ease of a kayak compared to the John boat and having to store it and stuff is just completely night and day difference. Throw that in the back of the truck and go. So that opened up a lot, but otherwise, yeah, just plugging along, fishing, still doing the YouTube stuff, just trying to have more fun with it. That was my deal last year: was fish more and have fun, and it was a success. So that's got to
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. If you take the fun out of fishing, it's not enjoyable, right? It becomes too stressful. You're more worried about making money than enjoying the reason you got to where you're at. And like, I'll be 100% honest, as a full-time guide, somebody who fishes 200, 300 days a year, I do have moments that I struggle with it, right? And I'm like, oh, this is tough. Like, and then friends will be like, what do you complain about? At least you get to go fishing. I'm like, yeah, but all the other things that are associated with
Yeah.
it, right, make it way harder to deal with and contend with. 4 o'clock in the morning every day, going to bed at 10, 11, sometimes midnight. It's
Yeah, I
when you get,
couldn't. That's why I could never turn him a fish, man. It's the same thing. Is like it would just zap the fun of it for me.
what's funny though is like I can sleep like a baby before a guide trip, right? Like if I get everything done, I'm in bed at 8 o'clock. I'm out until my alarm goes off.
Wow.
If I know I have a derby the next day, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking about all the situations I'm going to catch a fish, and I'm like, come on. So I know the love is still there, right? And the fire
Yeah.
and the passion to do it, or even going fun fishing. I get all hyped up because I don't have to worry about putting people on fish. I start thinking about how I'm going to
How
catch
do I want to catch them? What do
you,
I think I'll be able to use? Yeah.
right? And like I've broken it down into like smallmouth is spinning rods in fairy wands and sticks, right? And then by
Hey,
largemouth,
that's all the popularity now. Those
no,
are
it's
those have become cool again.
dude, I'm all about that jig head minnow. I won't lie. And then when I go largemouth fishing, it's like take all the finesse stuff out of the boat and I put all the big sticks in and just go have fun. And that's the way that I've rearrange the way I fish to benefit me on the fun personal side. So I'm glad that
Yes.
you took that step of growth to realize what you needed to do to find the quote unquote fun in fishing again, because ultimately that's what we're fishing for, is to have fun, to
That's
seek
it.
enjoyment in the outdoors. So kudos to you, man, to take that step back, take a
Yeah,
deep
thanks,
breath
man.
and realize it. So yeah. Are you just as frozen as we are?
I am, yes. Just temperatures this week. I was just looking on my phone. I think it was like negative 28 right now with wind chill. So super cold, but it's good because it'll freeze us over for one last hurrah this weekend. I didn't get to go last weekend ice fishing. So we had a crazy week of like 60s and like
Mm.
scattered stuff that kind of, yeah, destroyed the ice there for a bit. But the last week and a half, it's been all negative and super cold. So one more good weekend. Try to put some bluegill in the freezer, hopefully.
Yeah, bluegill. If you eat bluegill, you know how good they are. But if you don't eat like gills and sunfish, you are missing out. Like,
Dude, and
oh,
I guess I'm kind of a cheap date when it comes to fish because like white bass or yellow bass,
mhm.
crappie, walleye. Like to me, it's like a texture thing, but taste they're all pretty much the same. Like any of those clean white fish out of cold water, to me they all taste amazing. So
They're all fantastic. You don't have
yeah.
to worry about
Oh
all the gummy worms in them, et
yeah.
cetera, the
Yeah.
parasites. Yeah, fantastic. So, we're 5 minutes in and we're just chit chatting here, but I think we owe it to our viewers, right? The people who are tuning in, to kind of talk about the topic of today's conversation, and
Let's
that's
do it.
pond fishing, which is something that everybody does from time to time in their life. Usually, your first bass catch probably will come from a pond. So, I figured we would get you on, Debo, to chat about a few of your favorite pond bass and baits.
Heck
And
yeah. Yeah.
like, I feel like we can cover the ground from beginner to all the way to the expert with this topic. And I'm debating on if I want to make like a series out of it in the future
Mm,
or not, and kind of
that'd
make
be
like
awesome.
a 2 or 3 or 4 pond fishing segment. And I guess we'll leave that one up to the viewers who tune in. If they want to comment on it down below, go right ahead. But to dive in, Debo, the pond fishing guy from Iowa, right? Like, what is your first bait you're going to pick up when you're going pond fishing, and why?
Well, for pond fishing, like growing up, for me, I'll always be somebody who goes out and bank fishes, pond fishes because it's a time thing, right? So
Mhm.
with having kids now, dropping kids off to stuff, school events and all that stuff, I might only have a couple hours to fish, and by the time you get your kayak taken out, launched, all that, I mean, that's a good, loading and unloading. You're looking at 30 minutes, 45 minutes, so that's almost half your time gone if you've only got 2 hours. So for a lot of folks, I know it's popular just because of time, right? That's all they've
Okay.
got is to go out, let alone, maybe you don't even have a boat or some of that stuff. So, growing up pond fishing and bank fishing, for me, the number one thing was trying not to get snagged. And as I got more comfortable with that and realized that, a lot of those fish are where you're going to get snagged, it was kind of coping with that and how can we build on it. So for me, the number one pond fishing lure is going to be a Texas rig. I would say like a little 3/16 or quarter ounce weighted Texas rig with a plastic of your choice. It could be in the summer months like a 7-8 inch worm is great for all kinds of fish. A craw, some sort of craw like a rage craw or the reaction innovations beaver, something that you have confidence with in your area. And it's a saying on my channel: find wood, pitch to wood, catch a fish. And that's how I grew up fishing. Like
100%.
that's yeah, one of my confidence ways of catching largemouth is they're always on wood, right? They need something where they can feel safe, something that they can ambush from and hide. Around here, a lot of them are, pond. To me, pond is anything like from a couple acres to maybe 100 acres. We've got some really small lakes slash big ponds. Um, that kind of have little cutoffs and stuff. So each one could be a little bit different, but pretty much all of them around here always have wood. So that's why the Texas rig for me is just it's a 4x4. You can swim it, you can flip it and pitch it and that stuff. If you end up getting grass, as spring goes through and summer comes up, you're going to get a lot of that vegetation coming up. So you can flip that on, grass lines, just anything. And the good thing is you usually don't have to worry about getting hung up too much.
Right.
Yeah, because you want to get in those spots where the fish are. Growing up, I would fish too safe because I didn't want to get snagged. So instead of fishing, throwing it into that right into the middle of that bush like I will now, I would fish, 2, 3 feet out to be safe.
Yeah.
And you're just missing a lot of bites by not doing that. Dead summer, they're going to be tucked way into that. With their nose on it, so you might have to hit them right on the head. Close doesn't count in flipping and pitching wood. I need to make a hat that says that. That
Yeah,
would make
that's
a couple
good.
bucks.
You have In order to catch fish, you have to fish where the fish are, and I'm a
Yeah.
firm believer in that. And Texas rig is definitely the 4x4 of that because like you said, you can do just about anything with it, and it will go into just about anything if you have it
Hmm.
weighted properly or enough. So,
Yep.
or the minus, right? Like you need to skip it up on anything, something you go super light with it and then kind of slides in. Yeah, I'm huge believer in the Texas rig. You could even weightless rig, Texas rig stick
Sure.
baits and catch tons
Absolutely.
of bass, right? Like,
Yep.
so is there like a primary color pattern you like with the Texas rig baits?
Well, a lot of the places around here, unless it's a super grassy, like we have quite a few grassy ones that get pretty clean, but most of the water around us is pretty stained. So I would
Hmm.
say like 3-ish foot of visibility, is pretty standard around here. So I like a green pumpkin, something kind of dark. Some guys swear by black and blue. I'm a big purple guy. So like green pumpkin with
Yeah,
purple or black and purple, um, something like that with it. If I only had one color to pick, it would be the laminate that's like green pumpkin on one side and black and blue on the other. So like
yeah,
Reaction
like
Innovations
an
is Tramp
Okeechobee
Stamp.
craw tramp stamp. Yeah, great color
Yeah.
pattern.
Superbug, I think, is Missile Baits.
Mhm.
Berkeley's new The Goat, I think, is their color of it, the two tone. And
Yep.
if I could, yeah, pick one, that would be it. Otherwise, just a green pumpkin. It's really hard to go wrong with that. And you can get spike it markers. Throw a couple of those in your bag. You could add some chartreuse to it or orange or,
Such a
black.
great tip.
Yeah, yeah, and just gussy it up however you want, whatever gives you confidence. But yeah, a green pumpkinish or black and blue. It's pretty boring, but you hear that all the time for a reason. It works. So
Yeah, I mean, I think at times, and specifically in pond fishing, like pond fish will bite realistically anything that you throw at them because not technically, sometimes they're less pressured than like big waters, right? Like you have your casual bank throwers with red and white bobbers and worms and live bait, and they might not see as many artificial baits. I don't know how it is your way, but I feel like here where I'm at, whenever I've pond fished, if I just throw a Senko in or a stick bait, I'm going to catch a lot of fish because our ponds tend to be fairly unpressured and but they're fun. Like if you got to fix yourself and have some fun and go just catch a bunch of bass, pond is always home, right?
yeah, we had spots that used to be like that. After the whole COVID stuff, it just absolutely got crazy. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves is whoever you are, pick up your trash because like
Oh,
I mean, there would be days I would go out and not see a single person on some of the small lakes, for a whole day,
hmm,
bank fishing. And now it's so flooded with people and the trash. And yeah, so just pick up your stuff, be mindful of it. I shouldn't have to be your mom and pick up your stuff. So
yeah. And I mean, I find myself all the time when I'm stream fishing, grabbing garbage on my way out, and I'm just like, man, I hate picking up after people,
yeah,
and that's how we lose access to our
exactly.
pristine waterways that we want to fish is people not cleaning up after ourselves, and then we show up and they're posted, and we can't fish them anymore, and everyone
Yep.
is mad. So, going back to bait number one, Debo, what is the setup you're throwing it on, and why?
So I'll sound like a broken record here, but for bank fishing, I think if you primarily fish with a bait caster, not super light stuff and not crazy heavy stuff, I think a great do it all is like a 7 foot, 7.2, somewhere around in there, medium heavy with kind of a moderate fast tip, meaning it's a little soft in the end of it. So when you pick it up, it doesn't feel like a pool cue. You've got a little bit of bend to it. That way you can cast stuff. You can flip those, a quarter ounce Texas rig with no problem. So that would be my rod. Reel, I like a 7 speed reel as a do it all. Pick
Yeah,
your brand. And then line, probably 15-pound fluorocarbon. So that
love
would
it.
be my setup.
Yeah, that I think that just sounds like a universal all-around setup that you can throw any technique on, which I'm sure we're probably gonna mention that same setup here in the future on in this show. So I guess we'll keep going along here. And what is your baiter technique number two?
So number two would definitely be the frog. A lot of these small ponds, small lakes, they get grassy, but there's places where like with overhangs or like reeds and stuff where it might not necessarily be horrible, but one bad place cast with a treble hook lure and you need to go get your waders or some sort of float to try to go get it right. So for me, the frog again kind of became necessity just because I didn't want to get snagged all the time. Growing up, I wasn't a very good caster. My old man was getting snags out and stuff for me all the time. So on my own missions, it's like I didn't have unlimited tackle, so I've got to try to save stuff, and that's where the frog just I fell in love with it. Um, and the frog, I think the biggest misconception about the frog is you have to have pads. It has to be insanely thick for a frog to work, right? You hear that all the time from people. And I would say the biggest thing with the frog is getting comfortable with walking it. I don't hear enough people talk about walking and popping a frog. So I'm just a pointed nose frog guy. If I could only choose one, I would say 80% pointed nose, and probably 20% of the time I throw like a little popping frog. But the thing for me that I feel like has got me a ton more bites is you see people chugging the frog, right? They'll throw it out and chug, 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 stop, chug, 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 chug. But for me, it's walking it just like a little spook and making it kick back and forth real hard
Yeah.
and spit. I think it can mimic, bait fish, those little bluegill, when they're up feeding and kind of get stuck on stuff and kind of flutter. For me, I've just seen a lot more success walking that, doing different cadence, slow it down, speed it up, pause it, then get it going again. But
How
yeah,
many times have you paused it for like 10 seconds and all you see is the nose and you
yeah.
go to move it and it's just gone?
As soon as it goes, boom,
Oh,
it's the
man.
best. That's my favorite way to fish. If I could only fish one thing forever, frog, hands down.
Now, the beginner pond fisherman might realize that you can throw the frog out there and catch bass on it regardless. But I'm going to challenge you here.
Okay,
Do you trim the legs on them at all?
I do absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, there we
yep.
go.
The only things I do now, like right now, probably my favorite frog out of the package is the Swamp Lord, Berkeley Swamp Lord. I
It's
absolutely
a good one.
fell in love with that frog last year because it's always like I've got one here. This is an old, I think, what is it, Lunker Hunt or Live Target, like a real soft frog,
Yep.
right? But the hooks were not great on it. And then you get some where, the hooks might not line up with the body well. So you kind of have a crummy hookup ratio. But dude, the Swamp Lord, it weighs enough. It's a little bit heavier, so you can absolutely send it out there. Hooks are razor sharp on it. Body's super soft. But yeah, I cut the legs so they're about like 2 inches. Is
Yeah.
kind of my go-to, inch and a half,
And,
something like
and
that.
do
Pretty
you
short.
pick one longer than the other, just slightly longer?
I don't anymore. I used to. I've messed around with that. I've added BBs to it. I've done all the things, but for me, really now it's just cutting those legs short and learning to walk it. And the big tip for walking is it has to be on slack line. If you're trying to walk it and you notice you're just pulling the frog, your line's too tight. So let that line, kind of sag out a little bit, and then don't even touch your reel. Just start popping the rod until it starts walking, and then you can start reeling in that slack once you get the momentum going.
Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, some of my most memorable pond catches have definitely come on a frog. For like one of my favorites is where my dad was living at the time. There was like the local water department had a pond out in front
Hmm.
against the road, and you could sneak in.
Like
And
a retention pond.
yeah, exactly. And it was
Yeah.
deep, but it had reeds and cattails all the way around in there. We basically had to stand on a log that I don't even know how this tree was in there, but it was in there. And you could stand on it, basically surfing the water because it was like half inch above the water. And if you
Hmm.
stepped either way, you're going in. And I remember one blew up like 3 feet in front of me. Like as I was about to pull it out of the water because I could see him tracing it, and it was almost a 6 pounder out of that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I've only caught two fish out of that pond. One was 6 and one was 4.5, and they both came on a frog.
Wow.
So I'm like,
Good average.
I think somebody just threw fish in there because I tried fishing it like probably 20 more times and never caught another
Nothing.
fish. Yeah. But I'm just like, man, that was fun.
Yeah, that's always the best. It's always like my favorite is early in the morning, you can barely see. And that first blow up always just always rattles you, always gets you to jump, you know.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, frog fishing, I absolutely love it. Combo, I guess we can go into combo.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
That
I
one
get
might be a little
asked,
bit different.
yeah, a little bit different, and I get asked on this, and I know there's a ton of controversy on it, right? You'll see certain guys say, "Oh my gosh, you need that heavy a line for a bass. What, you know, what are you doing?" Well, I would challenge those folks to fish the same spot that I'm fishing with 8 pound line and see how that does. It's not for the fish, right? It's for the cover. So ice fishing, I catch fish on 2 3 pound,
Hmm.
ice mono all the time, but I'm just going straight up and down, right? So for me, 50 pound has actually been my go-to. I've dropped back down to 50. I go between 50 and 65, but it's for all the stuff that I'm around. It's just insurance. Could I catch them on 10 pound braid? Maybe without snapping it, but why not, bump up to 50 pound at least. Once you get around a branch or you get, stuck in those reeds, you're having to horse them out. It's night and day difference. Plus, with the braid, there's no stretch. And on a lot of those casts, as a bank angler, you're trying to send it as far down that grass line or, along that
Hmm.
brush or whatever as you can. So when you set that hook, you don't want that delay and stretch in the line like you'd have with mono. Um, but again, you can't be playing them on braid. So once you hit them, you've got to get them hard and get them to you. You're not, letting them try to take drag and fighting them that way. So
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing too is the higher you go up in braid pound tests, like break strength, right? It's gonna float better, but it's not gonna cast as well. So I think a 50
very
pound
true.
is a very good spot. That's what I use on my frog
That's why
rod
I've
as
messed with
well.
it. Yeah,
And
and depending on the braid, they can differ. But yeah, you do get a little bit better castability out of 50.
100%. So
Yeah,
yeah, oh man, I'm just dreaming of frog blow up.
I
I
know, man.
appreciate it. Uh,
I know.
I don't know if there's like I debate this all the time. It's like if I had like my Mount Rushmore of bass fishing techniques that I would have to do or throw to like completely make me happy as a bass angler, frog, probably like a spook or a popper, a jig, and number four would probably be a buzz bait, to be honest. Like I think those are the four most fun bites.
Yeah, that'd be tough. Frog is for sure cemented up there. It doesn't matter what happens. Frog is always
Yeah.
as soon as I get one blow up on a frog, I'll burn a whole day of just
Oh
fishing a
man,
frog,
it'll
even if I'm
ruin
not
you.
catching. I don't care. Yeah, I'll keep going for those blow ups.
100%. Oh, yeah. Bring on summer. Get rid of all this white, dreary
I
snow, right?
know. I
Or,
know, man. I did just get actually speaking of combos, I did just get a new frog rod.
ooh,
Frog rods have been something I've played with because going back to the telephone pole, a lot of the you don't need an expensive rod for frogging too. So beginner friendly, you don't need to go crazy expensive. But I guess going to the bank side, not as much the pond stuff, is I was trying to find one with a little bit smaller butt section, like the handle section to it,
yeah.
because swinging a frog stick, I was hitting my life vest sitting down in the kayak. So that's one thing I've kind of had to search around that's different from standing up fishing versus sitting in a kayak.
You want
Um,
like a 9 inch handle length, handle
I was thinking
paddle,
like,
handle butt, as opposed to like a 9 3/4.
yeah, yeah, just something shorter because so many of them, which I really like, standing up, I like the leverage. I like the long ones, but sitting down, a whole different deal. I'm not nimble enough to stand and fish like some of these cats I see out there in the kayaks. I'm kind of top heavy, kind of tippy, so
It takes time.
not my deal.
You'll get there.
Yeah,
And I'm preaching. I'm not a kayak fisherman at all. I got a nice stable bass boat that I can stand on the front deck, and
I
it,
get it.
it's pretty cozy. Not gonna lie. So well, we'll keep going here, and we'll round it out with bait number three, Devo.
Bait number three. This was a hard one. If I really had to cut it down, because nowadays I want a moving bait, a search bait, and for bank fishing, I feel like the popular cool kid choice now is chatterbait, right? But
Yeah,
I grew, and this is even going to differ from what I grew fishing up, because if I really think about it, if I want to stay as 4x4 and as snagless as possible, I'm going swim jig.
oh,
Um,
that's a fun one.
Yeah, spinnerbait was my search bait growing up. Just like I didn't know what I was doing with it really, but it was a bait I could just cast and reel when I was, unsure. And then it slowly started moving into, oh, I fish this around wood, it does real good, or I fish, bank it out, bounce it off these rocks, on these points and stuff.
Yeah.
It started coming along, but If I had to pick one, it would be the swim jig. And again, going back to your 4x4 ability, you can switch different trailers on a swim jig, to a paddle tail that's got more thump, to a really small finesse something, or even a crawl on the back. So you can change up how much and how little
Right.
vibration action you have to it. But again, with a lot of the lakes that we have with grass, even a chatterbait gets caught up in that, trying to pop it free. Spinnerbait's a no-go. Once you start to get in some of that slimy stuff,
Yeah.
it's done. But the swim jig, you can still get through those usually pretty free. So,
I'm sure you fished a bunch of swim jigs. Which one's your favorite?
dude, that is hard. I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. The Mobster was the one I threw last year the most from Booyah. I've got some of my own homemade ones. I'll tell you one that doesn't get enough love anymore, and they've kind of changed it. So I'm not sure the new one, but it used to be the all-terrain Grassmaster
Yeah.
jig. Long time ago was it. It was absolutely the one for me. It's got like a little rubber thing that you can kind of like lock the soft plastic in. Whoops,
Yeah.
that was really neat. So they had those at Gander here before all of our Ganders shut down. But
Good old Gander.
man, the old
I'm gonna throw one at you that I want you to go check out. The
okay.
Outcast Pro Swim Jig is
I've
the one
not tried it.
I've been throwing them for, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years now, and
Oh, okay.
they're really good. And then they got big stout hook on them. I believe it's I believe it's a 45-degree high tie on it, so it's good. And then another one
Sweet.
is the Beast Coast Working Man Swim Jig. It's a lot more
Just got some of
compact.
those.
Those
Yep,
are
just got some of
those
those.
are legit too. But yeah, like Black Blue, Outcast has a really cool one. It's got like a rainbow flash and a white skirt. So
Hmm.
that one works really well with like Kitech on the back of it. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorites for sure.
Yeah. Usually with my swim jigs, I'm a pretty like a bluegill, imitation. So green pumpkiny with, and you can always, change up your trailer to give it more color. So if even if you just get like 10 green pumpkins, you could put like a chartreuse trailer on, or something else that gives it color underneath, when you need
Yeah.
to on the go. But yeah, usually like a bluegill ish is the main forage here. So some sort of bluegill color.
Yeah, I love it. Man, that swim jig bite's so fun. Are you throwing that on fluoro or are you throwing it on braid? Because
I'm a fluoro guy. Yeah, I like mine on fluoro. I've fished both. In the real heavy stuff, I like the braid, but usually for around here, it's not super crazy, and I'm fishing the edges of it usually.
sure.
So, like 17 is usually my go-to on swim jig, 15, 17, depending on how thick it is. But I tend to err on the side of too heavy oftentimes, which for my finesse stuff, I've really had to kind of back down on that, because you start to lose action. But for most of my my more power stuff, I tend to go a little bit heavier than I need to. So.
That's fine. If you're catching fish, who cares?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the cool thing. Well, when you talk to people, it's like, oh, you should have been doing XYZ. Well, you could have 5 different guys on a lake, all fishing different ways, all catching fish and having success. So it's not a math problem. 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 in fishing. It's, it's all you. But
Yeah.
um, as far as setup, yeah. So 15, 17, honestly, pretty close to that Texas rig combo. I like to make sure my swim jig or spinnerbait, chatterbait, any of those is a little bit softer. So more of that true moderate fast, more of a bend to it.
Yeah.
Whereas, the Texas rig maybe just a little bit stiffer, but totally getting into the weeds on that. I mean, if you've got a 7 foot medium heavy, soft, fast tip, it'll work for both of those. Absolutely fine. 15-pound line and your 7 pound or your 7 speed reel again.
Now, do you have a favorite fluoro and what is your favorite braid?
P-Line Tactical is my go-to fluoro. It's softer. I know that's one thing that if you go with like some of the real cheap fluoros, people say, "Oh my gosh, it was like wire."
Yeah.
You're never going to get the mono softness. Like I'm still an old Trilene XL in the red box is my favorite mono, hands down.
Smooth
Still, you can still get
casting,
it.
baby.
Yeah,
Smooth
dude,
casting.
it's so soft. So still what I use to this day. But some of the fluoros are definitely softer now. They've come a long way since 20 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, Braid, I would say for bank anglers, especially if you're on a budget, I have yet to beat the Daiwa J braid.
Yeah. Do you like
I
the
think
4,
for
6, or 8? Is it
the
4, 6,
four,
4? Yeah.
4 and 8, yeah, the one in the blue box, the four, I think is just for the money. I don't think you can beat it. It fades. There's some I like better that don't have that. Some that are smoother and stuff, but for cost to not breaking. Like I've had, that's been actually talking about frogging. I got an expensive braid a few years ago, 50 pound, that I thought would have been more than good. And I had like 3 breakoffs.
Mm.
Could have been a bad roll, but yeah, Daiwa J braid has never let me down. So,
Yeah, there's good braids, there's bad ones, and there's ones that do like when you start getting into a higher carrier count. So that's what the 4, the 8, the 10, and the
hmm
12 is, right? As you get higher carrier counts, the braid is compacted and tighter and smaller in diameter. So if you're throwing like a 12, a 10, I think there's even 15 carrier braids now. You might want to go up to like a 60 or 65 instead of a 50 because the line diameter is going to be the same depending on how many carrier counts in that braid you have. So you might have to go up a little bit just to get a little bit more extra tension, resistance, breakage, etc. So just something to look out for. But anyways, Debo, I got one last question for you.
okay, let's do it.
And then I'll let you get out of here. So I want to say thank you for coming on the Lure Lab for the first time.
Yeah,
We
thanks for the
greatly
invite.
appreciate it, and hopefully we can have you on here again in the near future. But anyways, the Lure Lab, it is presented by Omnia. So the last question is the Omnia Juice of the Week, and
Ooh.
the juice of the week is: what is one piece of advice you would give our listeners who are tuning into this episode to help them catch more bass while they're pond fishing?
While you're pond fishing, okay, so the big thing for me is not going on I shouldn't say not going on, not solely going on past history. So you can definitely use it for a roadmap, but a pond, or a small lake can certainly change, from 1 year to the next, or 2 years, 3 years. And if you're bank fishing, you're probably hitting a lot of the same places, right? So I hear a lot of guys say, oh, I went to my spot, I threw a Cinco, they didn't hit it there, they weren't biting, I went home. I can't tell you how many times I've, especially spring coming up now is a great time to pond fish because you can walk around the whole thing. When it gets to, summer and later in the fall, all the weeds have grown up. A lot of the places aren't
Yeah.
accessible. Early in the spring, you can get all the way around that thing. So I would say experiment different times of the year. They can be in different spots just because, you know, uh, plentiful point, then, the normal point that you go to doesn't produce, doesn't mean they're not there. So I would say mix it up each year, that it can be different. So don't be afraid to, if it's early in the year and you don't normally throw treble hook baits, try throwing that square bill, or, lipless, or something that you don't normally throw because there's grass. Or don't be afraid to mix it up, and don't be afraid to try out different spots, because it's not always going to be those one or two, three spots that fish are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Fish change, but they also don't change sometimes. It's just you have to present something different to them than a Senko.
Yep.
And if you go from a Senko to a swimming worm, and instead of soaking it and just reeling it, you might catch some fish, especially in a pond or on a lake. It doesn't matter where you are. Fish is a fish. Fish need to eat,
Yes.
procreate, and survive. So it's
Yep.
just figuring out the puzzle for that day. So yeah,
Yep.
that's a great tip.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and that's one thing I say is, when I'm talking to people, like if we're out fishing together, is there's a guy somewhere on this lake catching fish, right?
Hmm.
Even if we're not, somebody's out here catching fish. How do we figure it out? So,
Absolutely. So just putting those pieces of the puzzle and then realizing what that puzzle piece is once it happens,
yes.
because so many anglers will catch a fish, but they won't realize why they caught it. And then that's the only bite they get all day. And that's the
Yeah.
next hard part to figure out, to go with and start running those patterns, which in a pond, it might be a little bit harder to put those clues together because there's not as much stuff to pattern, right? Unless you have a ton of trees and there's mapping of the pond. But yeah, it's taking me back to the roots. I'm ready to go pond fish. So
Yes.
I
Any
appreciate.
open water right now, I would take.
Yes. Fingers crossed for you that you get some in the next week or
Yes.
two. And like I said, everyone who's tuned in, don't be afraid to find Debo at Debo's Fishing on his platforms and go check it out, because you will learn all kinds of fun techniques for fishing. And it's a great place to be. And he streams live once in a while. So don't be afraid
Yeah.
to check
Saturday
it out.
nights. Come hang
Awesome.
out.
Heck yeah. So, all right, Debo, man, we're going to wrap it up here. And I appreciate you coming on, and we'll chat soon, man.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. No And thanks for tuning into this week's episode here on the Lure Lab, as always presented by Omnia. We greatly appreciate it if you're made it this far in the video. Please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up and please leave a comment down below if you just love pond fishing or how you approach ponds and catch bass. We want to hear everyone's story, so comment down below with that. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform that allows you to leave a review, please do so. We greatly appreciate it. It helps the Lure Lab be seen by more people who love bass fishing, that are getting into bass fishing, or just want to learn more about all the techniques and become better at it. We greatly appreciate it. And until next week, we will see you then.